questions. So they're all gonna flow right together. Dr. Perlman does have to leave after his presentation, so we'll take his questions right away, and then we'll save the other questions for the end, if that works. So take it away.
Great. So these are some preliminary results from a project that I started somewhat recently called Project Phobos, and I'll describe what the Phobos actually means. I love things that involve space, so what can I say? But I do want to thank my two interns over the summer, Michelle Conklin and Jenna Mullen. They were really the ones who took a look at websites and information that I'm going to describe for you. And we did that project at the University of Pennsylvania Center for Bioethics. And then in addition, I just joined University of the Sciences as a visiting professor, so I'll be continuing this project. And at the end, you'll see I want to pick your brains as to how I can actually achieve the sort of the phase 2 project goals. And so with your help and collaboration, maybe we might be able to work together on a project. So with that in mind, all right, I'm going to do this by hand. So what is Project Phobos? As I said, I like all things space. Phobos is one of the moons of Mars. But it also stands for public health, that's the PH, behavioral and social, which are the B and the S, and the two little O's represent the two little moons. And it makes a very nice, is it anagram? Okay. No, anagram is the same backwards and forwards, right? Acronym. Thank you. So it's an acronym. So our research projects are going to concentrate on the intersection between these areas. And in particular, in research ethics, there's not a lot of attention being paid to behavioral and social issues. It's largely a biomedical kind of enterprise, and the regulations are driven towards that. And as you probably already know, there's huge debate within that about what to do about us people in public health and biobehavioral research. So I have 4 phases of this particular project. I'm going to describe the first phase for you. It's a pure research project. And what we did was we analyzed publicly available information about research ethics, infrastructure, and processes at all 50 state departments of health and whichever territories that we could. So these are sort of just looking at publicly available information. It was a great project for undergraduate interns to try to tackle. The rest of the 4 phases that I'd like to accomplish is next with the help of my colleague Teresa Berger. She is my graduate research assistant at USP. We're going to be doing a more detailed survey of departments of health regarding their knowledge, use, and dissemination of guidance documents for how to determine when projects should be reviewed by an IRB and when they are pure public health practice and can go forward without IRB review. Phase 3, I do a little small business on the side. I'm going to hopefully be producing some educational and decision tools to help public health stakeholders actually make these determinations properly, based on evidence-based approaches in the literature. And then I actually think that taxpayers could benefit by having a national independent institutional review board solely focused on public health research. And I actually would like to put that together. And if any of you would like to serve on that, get in touch with me, and in 3 or 4 years we'll see how the project goes. So, a little bit of introduction. If you are not already familiar, it's actually quite a dilemma within public health of whether activities fall into that very narrow definition of what constitutes research and what actually constitutes other activities that would be under the purview of the Public Health Code of Ethics. And this can be particularly vexing. In my former life, I actually did this kind of determination for New Jersey. I was director of their Human Research Ethics program. Until I had to become a whistleblower, which is another whole story that I'm happy to share with you offline. It was very vexing because we didn't actually have really good criteria for how to determine, does this project meet the standard definition of research, or is this being done under the Public Health Authority using scientific methodology, but not trying to contribute to a generalizable conclusion about public health methodology or programs. So a little bit of the shameless self-promotion. I decided that this was really kind of interesting. And in particular, given the bioterrorism sort of initiatives that were around a couple of years ago and are still ongoing, I decided to actually write this puppy up and was able to publish it in the one of the JAMA journals, Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness. Not only is the issue itself very important for all public health stakeholders, but when you add in the fact that we have disasters where we have a very limited time frame, huge major impact, some of the activities that we may do may fall into the category of research, so we should have good processes for making sure that things that blur the line are well taken care of so that projects can go forward. There is guidance that can help you. The Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists have produced a very excellent guidance document. I sent them an email saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Your document has saved my job, made it a lot easier. The CDC also has guidelines. They're a bit older, and they depend largely on investigator intent, which I actually don't like, because an investigator could just simply say to their research ethics people, well, I don't intend this to be research, and therefore it doesn't require IRB review. And so that's the end of that story, which isn't good. The CSTE has a much more nuanced set of criteria for making the determination. So here's a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know how states and territories actually do distinguish research from practice. We know that they should, but we don't know what processes they use. We don't know who makes the determination. Is it the institutional official, someone high in the organization? Is it someone on the IRB? Is it the entire IRB? There's a whole lot of information we just don't know. We don't know to what extent people are aware of and use those guidance documents. We don't know how widely disseminated they are. And more importantly, we don't know what infrastructure, policies, and procedures exist for doing these sorts of things. So when much information is unknown, you assign a team to actually go about getting that information. And the first phase of our project was simply looking on websites, looking at the publicly available data that is from the Office of Human Research Protections. You can figure out who operates an IRB, who has a federal-wide assurance, and then get their website information and check it out. So using that public information, we've determined how many states and territories actually have an IRB and have a federal-wide assurance. And then we went to those websites and we looked for information specifically targeted towards how they determine research, how they determine practice. Here are our findings. Of the 50 states, 39 actually have IRBs. We don't know what the 11 are doing, and that's part of phase 2. One of the territories, I think there are 5 or 6 or 7 territories, one has an IRB. Of the 50 states, 44 have active federal-wide assurances, 3 territories do, which means they have an agreement with the federal government that says we're going to uphold the principles of good research. Several of them have inactive FWAs, and it's really not clear what the other sort of 1 or 3 or 4 territories are doing. 4 websites out of the 50 that we checked actually mention the CST guidance, so not a very widespread percentage. One website mentions the CDC. 4 websites actually mention both, which is pretty good. And 13 have other information, whether it be a link back to regulations where you can check the definition of research, or they have other information that says, please call us, consult with us, and we'll figure out how to go forward. So that was pretty much what I expected to see, because several years earlier I had actually done a very, very preliminary search and thought that there were about 35 states that were operating their own IRBs. The conclusion that we drew from this is that this might indicate that there's a lack of awareness of the importance of this particular issue. More education is needed. And while this preliminary analysis does help us to sort of clue us in that we can answer a couple of the questions, we know how many IRBs and how many FWAs, we really need to take a look under the rug, so to speak. The next phase is really where we're going to develop a detailed web-based 2-part survey where we figure out who does the determining, how do they go about doing it, and if they had several kinds of projects, how would they go about determining it? And from there, we should be able to use statistics. My hypothesis is that most states don't know what they're doing, and if they try to do what they're doing it probably haphazardly, and all of this is costing taxpayers a great deal of money. If you think, I'm going to try to create a benchmark of, each IRB member at a state Department of Health spends maybe 5 hours a month reviewing projects, going to IRB meetings, and if you take sort of baseline salary, and an IRB has an average membership of like 10 people, you're talking about maybe $30,000 a month that's being spent, and if it's not being done properly, why do it at all? Which is the reason why I'd like to form an IRB and do this and do it well. So we're going to be doing a mixed methods research, a part quantitative, part qualitative survey. Hopefully I'll be back in a year or 2, or maybe Teresa will be back in a year or 2 and can clue us in as to how our survey is going to go. These are very preliminary kinds of results. We're making our data publicly available on a Google site. If you just Google Project Phobos, you should be able to get there. It has all the information that you will ever need, and it will actually have this podcast uploaded probably sometime next week in case you have colleagues who are interested in the particular topic. So for that, I leave you. Here's my contact information at University of the Sciences. I am interested, as I said, in collaborations. I'm interested in finding out how I can actually fund Phase 2. So if you have ideas, I'd love to hear it. And with that, I will conclude and look forward to your remarks. And that's about it. Real quick and dirty.
We do have a couple of minutes for questions if there are any questions.
Rose.
I'm curious what you think is going on in the states that either have an IRB and don't have a federal-wide agreement, or states that have a federal-wide agreement but not an IRB. If they're following these federal guidelines but don't have IRBs, what is it that they're doing?
To be quite honest, I don't know. And it really gives me pause. Because technically they're receiving federal money, they're supposed to have a federal-wide assurance. You know, that's not good for any of the data that gets used at departments of health. I can tell you from my own experience, I know that our data was being given out like candy in New Jersey. They would give out 60,000 cancer registry bits of information when in fact they only needed 0.3%, and they just really weren't willing to do the matchups. So not too happy about things that are being done inappropriately. It's basically huge violations of people's privacy and confidentiality, which, as you know, is one of the largest issues in public health research ethics. I don't know what's going on. That's one of the questions that we hope to find out. And you should know that we're planning on getting a certificate of confidentiality to cover the research activities so that people will know that it's safe to talk to us. And if we find out that you're doing things wrong, we're not going to report you to OHRP. We're not police people, we're researchers. And we want to help the situation be better. So that's one thing I did want to sort of mention as a heads up. Good question. Other thoughts or questions? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. So have you all encountered this particular issue where you actually take a project to your IRB and they're like, we don't know if this is research, we don't know if this is practice, but we're going to go ahead and call it research just to be on the safe side.
Do you find a lot of partnerships with universities that people kind of just default to, like, oh, well, we leave that up to this partner? Does that happen?
So I actually think that state departments of health, having worked in one, should take ownership of their own research activities and should not rely on a university IRB. I can tell you from experience, we relied on a major academic medical center, and they did not have a clue about what public health was all about. They had a department of public health, but they only had one member on their IRB. They were largely set up for biomedical research. I would probably have less qualms if it were a more public health social behavioral institution that actually is aware of the fact that not all research that gets done is biomedical. I probably would have less qualms about that. I'd like to see state departments of health take ownership of the research they do. Yes?
You mentioned you were also looking for resources.
Yes.
Also, if they didn't have an IRB, did they direct folks to some sort of training or NIH website or something that you have on collecting any data around that?
To be quite honest, the training that's largely available is also largely geared towards biomedical IRBs. And the training that is out there on social behavioral, you either have to have a membership to what's called the CITI program, which is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative, and that's a paid program. I'm actually willing to bet that if I can get ASTHO, the American Society for Territorial Health Officers, or the CSTE to pony up a little bit of money, I could quickly and easily produce the training resources that they need that's based on the literature that's out there for a very reasonable price and make it freely available, which is what I'd like to do. We were talking about social justice earlier. I really think that if we can save taxpayers money, as much as I would like to make some money off of it all, I'd really like it to be more open access.
I think that's one of the things that I run into is I work with a lot of grassroots organizations and people just aren't educated. They really just don't understand that. I mean, they understand confidentiality as far as like victim service and the data that they collect and that type of thing, but they really don't understand the concept. They feel like if they anonymize the data, they take off the identifiers, they can basically do whatever they want with it because it's their organization's data.
Exactly.
So I run into a lot of that where I really have to try to educate people on, okay, listen, if we're going to be part of a research team, we have to do things this way. And I just think people just don't have the understanding and the information because they don't have the same necessary education that you would get in an academic. They don't have IRBs and
exactly. And
services.
let's not even get into the sort of community-based participatory research where the education level is not even up that.
Because that's where I work.
Exactly.
And that's what I do. And it's
exactly.
A whole other.
And I have actually heard there's actually some researchers that I know that are doing research on the research ethics of using community-based participatory people to go out and recruit research subjects and the things that they will do. It's sort of an observational trial. Very interesting. You know, there you have therapeutic, quote-unquote, misconception, misrepresentation, all of your classic biomedical research ethics issues that are being put now into sort of public health and programs where people are going out there and they want people to enroll in their research, and it's a problem. So it's a huge training learning curve, I
Well, and
think.
there is no central IRB. You know, there is no one to go to regulate this. Even
No.
if you wanted to try to regulate it, you really have to do it. You have to be self-regulated, and a lot of these agencies just don't have that understanding to do that.
So that's the idea, is where Project Phobos hopefully will produce resources for that. So hopefully in 3 or 4 years we'll come back and have more to report. I used up all my time?
Yeah, we did great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Feel free to, I can pass out cards or something, or you can contact me. And I have to figure out how to stop this recording.